I've heard it said that the scariest thing you'll ever do won't feel scary once you do it. And that's 1,000% correct. I quit my job 6 years ago this week while on a beach in Vietnam. My life since has not been the same. I had this incredible, you know what, F this moment while I was on vacation. But that was a long time coming. And if you have questions about what a long time coming looks like, go back and watch my previous video. But now that I have been in my new real world for 6 years, here's everything that I've learned. Let's jump in. Welcome to part 2, where I am going to talk about how I became a digital nomad. I've already talked about the personal side of what my foundations were as I became a digital nomad, that I always wanted to travel. All of that was covered in the last video. If you haven't watched the last video, click back and check it out. Now I'm going to talk about myself a little bit more professionally. As you learned in the last video, I have a lot of sales experience, both for the corporate world and in the entrepreneurial space. So my sales experience goes deeper than just selling courses for women on the internet. My sales experience goes back to learning it in a corporate environment, teaching it in a corporate environment, and actually being studied in a corporate environment as well. But I want to take a step back before we go through how I got here year by year, which I'm going to do. I'm going to go 2019 through 2025 so far and talk about the finances, the fun, all of the things that went into becoming a digital nomad and having the courage to stay out in the world. I'm going to read you a line from one of my journals from 2019. I wrote down, it says, my 5 truths. And those truths were my values. They are joy, freedom, curiosity, empathy, and intellect. To me, joy means anchoring in experience. Freedom means making every decision mindfully. Curiosity means naturally wonder and observe. Empathy is strive for understanding. And 5, intellect, knowledge is, why do I bring those 5 things up? Because to me, everything that I do, the way that I live my life, comes back to joy and curiosity and empathy and intellect. Everything that I do is much more than copywriting. So I am a digital nomad and a copywriter. I have been traveling more or less full time for the last 6 years, and I've been dreaming about this life for a heck of a lot longer. When I pulled out that journal, I was actually looking for an entry in which I wrote what my ideal life would look like 5 years from now. And I wrote that in 2018, 2019. I couldn't find it, so it might be in another journal. But I remember vividly what I wrote down. And it was that working out didn't feel like a chore, that I was able to climb mountains whenever I wanted to because I was physically able to, and that I didn't have to ask permission to go. I wrote down income goals. I wrote down goals of who would be with me. And I mentioned in my last video, I'm living the life that I want to be living. I have an incredible partner. I love the work that I get to do for other people. I spend my time more or less doing exactly what I want all the time. I am so fortunate, and I don't feel that there's anything missing. And part of that is because I was so rooted in my goals that creating a life around them just made sense. What did I want? Because I mentioned in my last video, I had no idea what I wanted. I thought that I would just quit my job and travel the world and things would fall into place. And that's literally what's happened. I didn't say that I wanted to build a copywriting agency and then tear it down, but that's what happened. So after that day when I was on a beach in Vietnam, what happened? What has happened in the 6 years since then? 2019. I was on a beach in Vietnam. I quit my job. That entire story is in the last video. And after that, I breathed. I took a step back and I breathed. And I finished out my vacation with my friend. He had to return to China to go back to work. And I stayed in Southeast Asia. What was wild is he and I had planned on going to the airport together. And I still booked myself a ticket out so that we could share a ride to the airport. Didn't really think much of it until he and I were in the airport, both on the international terminal. And I looked up and I saw the flight out of Vietnam that I was supposed to be on that was going to take me to my connecting flight home. And it never really clicked for me, like, holy crap, like, I still have a ticket on that flight. I could get on that flight right now and go home. That is an option for me. But I didn't. I got on a flight to Bangkok, and I took I took another flight and then a boat, and I ended up in Koh Tao, Thailand, because I had decided that I wanted to learn how to dive. When I say that I wanted to breathe, I learned how to breathe underwater. I learned how to breathe for myself. I took a lot of time to just get to know myself. So what were my goals in that moment was to just take some time, learn about myself, and figure it out. Also, I mentioned that I had some money in the bank. So I had a little bit of time. I had several months worth of time. And I was incredibly lucky at 27 years old to have that time for myself. But I also realized really quickly that I was doing exactly what I wanted. The only thing that was missing was an income. So I needed to figure out how to make money. And this is where I left off in my last video, was saying, what is something that was incredibly challenging in the moment that changed the trajectory of my life is that I didn't have a computer with me. I had a backpack with a week's worth of clothes. So I went to an internet cafe in the year 2019. There were still internet cafes in Koh Tao, Thailand. And I went to an internet cafe and I sent an email to maybe 3 or 4 people that I knew who had businesses. One of them was my accountant. And I said, hey, I'm a free agent. I just quit my job. I'm figuring things out and I am completely willing to do whatever it is that you need me to do. I don't know how much to charge for things. So if you need stuff, let me know. I'll figure it out. And every person who replied asked me to write something for them. And of course, on the side, I was still travel blogging for myself. So every week or so, I would put out a new post. I had no idea what SEO was, so I wasn't really optimizing my posts at all. I wasn't going for ads. I was just trying to get people to read my stuff because I thought that what I had to say was important, and it was. However, nobody's eyes were getting on it, and I needed to earn some money. So somebody else had reached out and said, but what you could be doing is writing blogs for other people. So one person hired me to write blogs for her. I ended up staying in that ghostwriting gig for several years and wrote for companies like Fast Money, Forbes, NerdWallet, tons of companies that you've heard of. I was writing finance blogs because my first stage of my sales career was in finance. Somebody else reached out and said, I hate my homepage on my website. Could you rewrite it? And I said, yeah, sure. Somebody else reached out and said, these are 6 emails that I send to people and they're not converting. Can you help me get people on my calendar? And I said, yeah, absolutely I can. This is what I did for my corporate career, was send emails that got people to schedule time with me. For sure I can do that. So every single person asked me to write for them. And I didn't know about LLCs. I didn't know what I was doing. I ended up staying in Southeast Asia for another 3 months. And then I decided to come home. September, I came home back to the US and I had a lease through the end of the year that was expensive and I wasn't making much money. So I decided to go back to Dallas, get my car, and do a road trip around the US. I visited all the places that I had always wanted to see, and in my spare time, I was hiking, writing, camping, staying with friends and family, eating tuna packets out of the back of my Honda Fit, and really living exactly what I had wanted to do, which was, like I said, camp, hike, write, read, do all of those things. I also started reading all of the books that I had been told that I would have to read someday. So I dug into Kerouac and Vonnegut and tried Shakespeare. That didn't stick. And I was doing and going all of the places and things that I always thought that I would. And that's how I finished out 2019. I started spending a heck of a lot more time with my family, drove to Iowa. My dad drove down to Texas with me. I spent a lot of time with friends, and I decided to try to build my travel blog and my ghostwriting business, and ended up installing my LLC in November of 2019. My lease ran up. I drove my car back to my mom's and I said, okay, I will be back in 6 months. I'm just gonna go travel for a while. So at the beginning of 2020, I went to Morocco. Very quickly in 2020, things started to change, and I was visiting my mom. My mom was living in Germany at the time. She still had a house in the US, so that's where I had left my car. And I went to go visit my mom in Germany. And then March of 2020 happened. And what was a 2-week trip to see my mom turned into a 6-month trip to see my mom. And it was during that time that I had a lot of time to sit down and work on my blog and work on getting clients, and also a lot of people wanted to go online during that time. So businesses were striving to get seen online, which meant that they needed copywriters to give them websites for the first time or better websites and workflows and emails that would get them seen. So I fell very naturally into the accountants and financial individuals of the world and was writing a ton of websites in 2020. What I didn't know was that I was undercharging them a ridiculous amount. It was a learning experience. However, I was fortunate that within a year of quitting my job, I was making more every month than what I was spending, both in my business and life. And my goal, if you remember, when I quit my job, was just to extend the runway. I didn't think that I wanted to make a bunch of money and do this forever. I just wanted to travel until I ran out of money. And then I would probably go back and find a corporate job. So it was during 2020 that I realized, holy cow, this might actually be sustainable. I might be able to just run a business forever rather than go back to working for someone else. Eventually, my visa in Germany ran out. I was able to get an extension and stay for 6 months rather than 3, which is what Americans can do in Germany. And I decided to head to Mexico. I ended up living in Mexico for the remainder of 2020 and the beginning of 2021 and really slowed down on my travel goals, but really had a lot of time to dig into my business. I joined my first coaching program, which was an incredible program run by a woman named Jamie Jensen, and it was called Create Your Six-Figure Copywriting Business. She taught me how to price myself, how to use the profit first method, gave me a ton of guidance on how to get clients, and that's where I really grew the foundations of my copywriting business. Mid-2021, my partner had asked me to move to the US, so I moved back to the US. We had met in 2020, and his job is stationary. So ever since mid-2021, I've actually been half nomadic. I spend half the year traveling and half the year here with him, which is also why I have a home base, even as a digital nomad. I spend all of my time all over the place, but I'm also not quite really a digital nomad according to nomads, and I'm not really stationary according to my stationary friends. 2022 came around, borders started to open more. I traveled to South Africa. I did my first safari, which was incredible, and that was also my first year out earning what I did in my corporate career, which was really fun. But to make note, that took 3 years. It doesn't happen overnight. Everybody says that, but it took me 3 full years of being full-time in my business to replace my corporate income. So I was okay taking a pay cut, knowing that profit was coming, because I had given myself runway, because I didn't have a mortgage or a house or a dog or a child to take care of. Everything was up to me. It took me less than a year to be earning more than I was spending. It took me 3 years to replace my corporate income, but I was a sales girly. Salespeople make a lot of money. So it did take me 3 years to do that. That was also the first year that I wrote for a launch that grossed over 7 figures, which was really cool. So I also saw a lot of the value in what I did and how that impacted other people. However, to be honest, 2022 was really hard. I had some mental health issues in 2022 where I needed to take a step back for myself. I made some business decisions, especially in another coaching program, that kind of put me underwater for a while. Business really slowed down for a little bit, and that was the year that I cried the most in business. I think I saw myself growing and growing and growing every year, and then I just got busy and overwhelmed, and life was lifing, and that was probably my hardest year in business, was 2022, and it took probably until well into 2024 to really bounce back from that. However, it's like that thing that says that we're all houseplants. We just need sunshine and water. We're just houseplants with complicated emotions. That much was very true. And I realized that though I felt I was being buried, I was truly being planted. And I used that time of having very little business to ideate and create. And that's where my signature program, Copy on Demand, was also born. Came from that time of hardship where I said, I know these ideas in my head are so good. How can I teach more people? How can I show more people what I do and meet them where they are? Because to me, it seemed that people weren't spending. So that's where I created Copy on Demand, which is a hybrid done for you, done with you copy coaching program. I launched that in January of 2023. And then in 2023, I proceeded to go to South America for most of Q1. I spent some time in Europe that year as well, and also launched my VIP days that year. 2023 ended up being my first 6-figure year, which was also great. And again, that's 4 years into business before I reached a 6-figure year. 2024 was a business as usual year. In 2024, I also grossed well over $100,000. had a lot of really great projects, a couple more 7-figure launches, continued copy on demand, really leaned into it, joined a mastermind that I absolutely loved. And then 2025 is best year yet. That sounds so cliche to say, but truly the best year yet. I have an incredible network that I've worked for 6 years to build. I have an assistant who I don't know what I would do without her. I find that my tech is really well aligned right now. I'm loving my business. I love copy on demand. I'm loving the people that I get to serve. There is not a single thing in my business that I could complain about right now. And I am so lucky to have you here along with me. So that is how I became a digital nomad. That is how I financially swung it. And that is how I've built this business to really support who I am at my core and to my values. And as I look back at these values of joy, freedom, curiosity, empathy, and intellect, I hope that when you work with me, you see those values. That you say, Sam is absolutely really freaking good at selling. Sam can get inside of my brain and sell things for me. And she is this values-aligned person who puts her life first. Because when I am living my best life, I can do my best work for you. And this is exactly where I had hoped to be when I quit my job 6 years ago. So as I come up on this 6-year anniversary, it's really fun to synthesize these feelings with you. And if becoming a digital nomad is something that you want to do, reach out. I'm happy to talk about it. It is not for everyone, and the way that I did it is not the way that everybody should do it. But I'm glad to be on this side of things. I'm glad that I can run my business from this year. I've done it from Vancouver, Canada. I've done it from all over South America. And later this year, I will be launching my podcast from Montenegro in Eastern Europe. This is exactly where I wanted to be. And I'm glad that you're here with me. Be sure to like and subscribe. I will be launching my podcast on this channel in September. Your support means the world. And whenever you have questions, reach out.